Hello and welcome to part 4 of our series on Gukesh's best wins. This fourth game that we'll see that Gukesh won with black against Alireza Firouzja in the 2023 Norway Masters. It's the first part of our 2023 part of the series. We only looked at 2022 games before that. But yeah, with this one we can see that black is playing in the modern style against the modern Italian, not making it so easy for white to just grab space on the queen side. White goes rook e1, castles, knight to f1. And yeah, so I'm making the point you don't really need to stop a move like knight g4 or bishop to g4, as knight at g4 is just very well met by d4 at this point. So instead, Gukesh plays the move of a4 here, just to grab some more space on the queen side. If you want to play bishop e6 and trade off the bishop that way, well, that's the main line, but it's not really the focus of this training. In this game, actually, it's a very exciting one because we're going to see Firouzja set up a very nice attack against the black king, and then black's going to do a very nice counter-attack. Now, a common idea in this variation is, let's say, if white plays h3, for example, black can then play the move rook a5 and suddenly make it a little bit awkward for white to defend his bishop against b5. And this somewhat explains why Firouzja played the move of bishop b5 to hit the pawn, to which black played the move a3, setting up the fawn pawn. White played b4, bishop b6. And by the way, if you have been enjoying this series and the videos so far, do make sure to click the like button below and also to consider subscribing. Now, when you're subscribing, if you also tap that notification bell and set it to all, that's going to ensure that you'll be able to be notified when the rest of the series is posted as it's posted, to make sure you don't miss any of Gukesh's best wins and my explanations of them in these trainings. With that out of the way, let's now see how the game played out. Probably the best try for white here is just to go knight g3, let black reroute the knight toward g6 and go for c6 and d5. Because white can hit first with d4, and often the player who is able to get their pawn in the center in the Italian game, that is both pawns in the center, will often be the one with a little bit of an advantage. I do think here as well that, after h3, just stopping any bishop g4 and any pressure on the pawn, that, white is probably going to have a very small edge in this position. In the game, though, Firouzja played the prophylactic bishop to c4, bringing the bishop back to this active diagonal, somewhat anticipating the idea of going c6 and d5 by black. The game continued knight g3, knight g6, and it's all pretty standard by both sides, like c6 prepares d5 to kick the bishop and take the center. One anticipates this with bishop to b3. And now most of you watching this video might have expected maybe that black would just play some solid move, like maybe rook to e8 or maybe bishop e6 or something. But that also allows white to go d4 and again get that space advantage in the center. So Firouzja kind of, or rather Gukesh made the good point to Firouzja that, well, maybe I can just play d5 anyway. And you might be wondering, well, after takes and takes, can't white just take a free pawn on e5? Well, for one thing, there is a counterattack on the c3 pawn, but even more importantly, after takes, there's a very typical tactic for the Italian game that you really should know if you play e4, e5 with either color. And that's the move of bishop takes f2. You could also play queen f6 first, but yeah, this is a direct way, just winning the exchange and winning the game. So this is why you can't really take on e5, and, we can see here that the opening has been a success for black. The black has extra space in the center. It's got the fawn pawn that can be a fawn in white side in the endgame. After knight h5, though, black does have to be a little bit careful, because there are some storm clouds gathering around the black king. And the move of bishop c7 to defend the pawn is probably just a little bit passive. The bishop is on a really nice diagonal right now, and I think this is why Gukesh should have played the move of queen to d6 in the game. Maybe he was concerned about queen c4 and some sack on h6 and mate on g7, but the computer points out this very, computerish answer of actually sacking on h3 and, playing queen d7 and, my first thought isn't white just blundering, black just blundering a piece. But then the move queen f5 comes and the point sort of becomes clearer at around this stage. That, you can't just move the knight away because knight d4 and you basically just are killing their king in a sense. So, but okay, that's a bit sophisticated. I think most normal humans would probably just play king h7 and, go on with their life, let's say. But yeah, bishop c7 was played, and I really like Firouzja's next move of playing d4 in this position, just opening up the center for his rook and for his knight. At this point, maybe the best bet is actually to play a move like knight f6 and just try to cut your losses in a sense. But instead, after ed4, it's actually at this point that, well, I mean, if you look at Gukesh's game so far, like one of the main skills we've really learned from his games is the art of effective attacking play. And actually, it's also something with Firouzja's style as well, as he is a very creative and very strong attacker. But here, White admittedly missed the mark, where the automatic knight takes d4. Did see White ultimately lose his advantage. So you might be wondering, well, what's the alternative here? And the answer is that bishop h6 is very, very strong. Because if you take the bishop, queen takes d4, and suddenly it's very hard to defend against queen g7 mate. If you block with f6, well, then the bishop on e6 is hanging. This is a problem. And if you play some intermediate move like knight takes c3 first, for example, well, it's still the same problem, right? Like, you can't just take the bishop, because then you just get mated on g7, but otherwise, how do you defend the g7 pawn? Like, black is just getting murdered here. So if Firouzja had played bishop h6, I mean, he probably just wins the game, most likely, in practice, but after knight d4, yeah, this gives Gukesh a reprieve, and, the queen d6 was played. Probably in hindsight, it's better to play queen h4 and, try to get some counterplay against f2 in this way as such. Because after queen d6, the computer kind of points out some nice ideas where it turns out even in a delayed version, you can actually play g3 and, again, go for this h6 sacrifice, where it works a little bit differently in this version as such, but it turns out this is still going to be quite good for White, actually. Queen d5 runs a knight f6, and if you do play cd5, the problem is White can just go knight b5, trade off the bishop for the knight, and then after knight f6 and queen d4, we see that there just isn't really a good way out of the discovered attack and potentially checkmate on g7. So that will basically just be winning for White. But okay, this is of course a very computerish variation, and I share it more for, let's say, intellectual honesty more than, to say that, yeah, I expect that, every player is going to find it. Maybe Carlson would find g3, but I don't think many others would. But yeah, knight g3 was played in the game, and after rook a d8, knight e6 and fe6, we can see here that Black's active pieces do compensate for White's bishop pair and the isolated pawn on e6. Typical example of modern chess, you could say, of the initiative especially being prioritized. Because one of the main tenets of the Indian school of chess coaching is to really prioritize the initiative above everything else. And so you can feel that with the activity of Black's piece here as well, like knight takes b4, grabbing a pawn, Firouzja finding the great intermediate move of bishop g5, like, it is something that, very, standard Indian school of chess teaching, with Firouzja also having learned these lessons, despite, originally representing Iran in his youth, not India. But yeah, from here we can see White does have some good compensation, where, you can bring the rook in, the e6 pawn as a target. The black king is certainly quite exposed if we can, line up things on the light squares. So Black has to be a little bit precise. And I do like his move of g6 quite a lot. There's a nice prophylaxis by Gukesh, making bishop c2 less effective. Of course, a move like knight e4 is not really a thing here, because we just go knight f3 and get a very beautiful little checkmate with queen h2 and king h, queen h1. This is why you should be solving your daily tactics puzzles. But the move rook 81 in the game, it was criticized by the annotator, but I don't think it's actually that bad of a move to sacrifice the second pawn and really prioritize your activity and initiative with the opposite colored bishops. That said, I do think the move bishop e6 is probably a mistake by White, where I think that the move White needed to play to make this work was to play knight e4 and just really try to get the knight into the attack. Maybe Firouzja was wondering, well, what if Black just goes queen e7 and, just defends everything? But it's not so easy after queen e3. There is a threat to the pawn on g5 as such, and, let's say you try to defend it with knight f7. Yeah, it turns out White has a surprising amount of compensation. Like, at some point, White's just going to play knight c5, just take on e6, and, this bishop is going to be a lot better than its counterpart. So, Not the most obvious thing from a human point of view, but it does turn out that this is basically what allows white to stay in the game and, actually have quite reasonable compensation, as it turns out. But yeah, instead, if white plays bishop e6 in the game, then it's a very different story where, maybe white's only down one pawn, but removing this pawn kind of gives black a lot of activity, where, his piece are not stuck defending the weakness anymore. He can just go queen f4 and play a lot more aggressively. And yeah, white does get the material back, but in the process of regaining the material, he's kind of placed a lot of his piece on maybe not the most ideal positions, and allowed black to take the initiative with his next move here. If you want to play rook d2, that's not bad either, but the best move here is Gukesh's move of knight to d3, forking the rook and the pawn. If you play rook f1 to try to defend him, the problem is that knight c5 comes, hitting the rook and the bishop, but also threatening rook d2, and white just can't deal with this basically. Even rook d8 is also good as well as rook d2. Point being, yeah, white is just getting killed on the dark squares. So white instead played rook d1, maybe hoping that, okay, if knight takes f2, then okay, at least I can sort of limit the losses to a pawn and, try to survive in a position like this. Computer point out you can ignore the threat to the knight with queen c2 and, try to slow black up a bit in this way. But Gukesh, yeah, just played very, very precisely. He made this one mistake, with bishop c7 and ed4 earlier, but after that, he's basically played almost all the best moves. And knight c1 is just super, super precise here, where if you try to keep your rook defended, black's just going to take and just win the house on the king side, as you can see. And in the game after rook c1, yeah, white was just down material, and black also has the initiative to boot, so it's just all over. Rook ff2, precise to the very end. Take, queen g2, queen g2, queen to d2, I should say. And white resigned here because at some point, black is just going to fork one of the white pieces, either king f3, queen f4 to fork the king and the rook, or something like, let's say, king g1, queen e3, forking the king and the bishop, and yeah, black will just be way up in material after this. So a very, very exciting game and a very instructive game by Gukesh, where you can really feel the immense energy with which he played in this middle game, and actually Firouzja also showed some nice energy, but just missed a couple of key moments. Got maybe a little bit too greedy to grab back the material, and that allowed black to start to take control of the game with this lovely knight d3 as we saw before. Yeah, do let me know in the comments below, were you as impressed with the game as me? Did it make a strong impression on you as well? And yeah, if you know of any other Gukesh games that come to your mind that you would really like me to explain how Gukesh won, then do let me know that in the comments below also. Actually, May is kind of an interesting month where I'm kind of working on a few different little projects, actually, which I'll, make sure to keep you guys updated on in the, with different videos and so forth. But in order to basically, get more of my content for free, I'd recommend that you check out my free Facebook group, Adult Chess Improvers. It currently has nearly 2,000 members, and I actually have as many as 4 chess posts by me scheduled each day, covering a mix of different things like chess puzzles, different articles, different chess improvement and chess mental game advice. Some different things that you might not find, let's say, from other chess content creators, as it were. I like to put my own little spin on things, as you might have noticed. But yeah, do make sure to click the link below. It's free to join that Facebook group, and I really believe that, yeah, you're going to get a lot out of it in terms of improving your chess. So, yeah, I will see you in the group. Take care for the rest of your day, and, yeah, we will see you around in due course.